just prior to the Second World War, just over 75,000 German, primarily Jewish, refugees came to Britain. And they would go on to make an extraordinary, valuable contribution, not only to technology, but to fighting in the forces during the war. And after the war, they would also go on to make an invaluable contribution to British life and technology. I'm delighted today to be speaking with Dame Stephanie Shirley, and we're going to be sharing the secrets of her life and how she made an incredibly successful life, having come to this country originally as one of those refugees. Dame Stephanie, thank you so much for joining me today. How would you like me to address you?
Well, I find that the Dame Stephanie is a bit pretentious. It's very good for getting a table at a restaurant. But I like to be called Steve because that's the name that I used when I started in business.
Okay, and so you'll explain a little bit more about that perhaps later in our discussion today. But you came originally to Britain as a refugee, but what do you remember of Nazi Germany? Because you were very young, weren't you?
Well, this is not a good answer for you, but I remember next to nothing. I was 5 years old. What I remember is the mood, having to move around, I think it was 7 countries of Europe, with my parents trying to find a safe place. But as a toddler, of course, I didn't know what was going on. So it was only in retrospect that I realised how important that experience was in moulding my life.
So you were just 5 years old when you left Nazi Germany, and I think came via Vienna at one point.
The actual journey was fairly traumatic. I do remember families wailing at the railway station from which we left. And I've never heard wailing like that before. It wasn't a sort of cry. It may be something very Jewish, I don't know. But it was, parents were clutching their children and so on. And many of them did not expect to see their children again and did this very brave thing of sending their children away.
So you came out with the Kindertransport. Do you remember that journey?
Oh, yes. It was a traumatic thing. 2.5 days from Vienna to London. Mm-hmm. If you can imagine a train that I have read was about 1,000 children on our train. We left Vienna on July the 4th and arrived on July the 6th.
You came to Liverpool Street Station?
By train from Hook van Holland to Harwich and then by train to Liverpool Street Station. I can remember the arrival very clearly because England was so grey, and this was in July. And the other thing I remember was that the station was silent, having left this noisy Vienna station. And I sort of think, could that be? I mean, memory does funny things to you. And I think we were probably all just so traumatised, 1,000 children, dirty, I can't remember what we ate, but we were certainly sort of ready for a bit of tender loving care. And we waited in a cavernous hall somewhere. We're sort of sitting on a banked on palliasses, mattresses filled with straw, and waited to be claimed, a bit like lost luggage. And we were lost luggage, I guess.
Yeah. So you didn't actually know who your foster family would be?
No, we knew the name. It was organised, and let me pay tribute to them and Guy and Ruby Smith, who were a childless couple in the Midlands of England, who took I and my older sister, Renata, in and brought us up really as they would their own. And I know I'm their child in all but birth, because although I was reunited with my birth parents, sadly I never bonded with them again. The gap was too long, the expectations and dreams were so unrealistic. So auntie and uncle, as we called them, were really loving parents to us. And I'm very conscious of all the aunties and uncles who took us children in those days.
So how long was the separation from your parents in the end?
Well, it wasn't all that. For my father, several years. For my mother, she got herself to England as well. She bribed her way across Europe, one time with the fur coat that she was wearing, as she always continually told us. And we knew where she was. She could take work only in agriculture or domestic service. And she chose domestic service and cleaned somebody else's nice house for some years. And later on, she qualified as a teacher, and she served as a cook in the hostel for schoolgirls. Gradually, she got herself on her feet. Eventually, she was able to have one child with her and my older sister, who had not settled as well as I did. I was younger. She was 9. She resented changes of culture because it was extremely difficult. It was a new land, new language, new parents, new food, new climate, no central heating. God, we were cold.
So what about your education when you were here?
Well, I started off at the local village school run by a Miss Proud, I loved it there, really. I started to pick up a sort of Birmingham accent, which my rather snobbish foster parents were not very keen on, and so they sent me to a private Roman Catholic convent, which was a lovely upbringing. It really was. They didn't push the religion on me at all. We were secular Jews anyway. It doesn't really mean I don't have any faith. But they didn't push the religion. But what they gave me, Helen, was love, confidence, the concepts of self-sacrifice, the concepts of duty, the concepts of right and wrong. And I think some of my moral compass comes from those years. But they were not professional teachers. They were nuns in black habits with white wimples, I think they're called. But they were sufficiently professional to realise that I was a bit gifted in mathematics, and to say to my foster parents, we can't teach this child anymore. She ought to go somewhere better. It's quite extraordinary. Yes. So I sat for a scholarship and got one. I mean, I was a bright child, and I knew that education was so important. So I went to a little grammar school and then transferred to another grammar school. They also, after a few years, realised that they couldn't teach me mathematics, and that's what I wanted to do. And so they put me through a barrage of tests. And eventually decided, well, yes, we will have to sort of provide something. So they sent me to a boys' school, because we didn't have unisex schools in those days. So I learnt my mathematics at the boys' school. And the fact that this was a border town of Oswestry, the fact that they went to the effort of making sure I did get my mathematics has made an enormous difference to my life as well, because I finished up in computing.
Where did your love of technology come from? Was it a natural progression from your brilliance with mathematics? So when did you first get into this technological side?
Well, I wanted to be the world's greatest mathematician, but at the age of 18 I realised I wasn't going to make it. And luckily for me, computers were coming along. And so there was no rules or regulations. It was very unstructured, and it was a wonderful opening for me. And I just switched from mathematics to computing, which needed mathematics in the early days. So it was a very natural progression for me. And now, I look at some of I've been sorting out some of my husband's things and look at some of my old papers. I can't understand them anymore. Stuff that I wrote myself.
You worked at Dollis Hill for the early part of your career. Dollis Hill, of course, we know in the public that there was a secret bunker underneath, which would have been for Churchill, out of town. It was hush hush, was it? Even when you were working there.
Oh yes.
It was hush hush.
Yes.
But you worked in the research station above, didn't you? Were you able to talk a little bit about the kind of thing?
At the age of 18, I worked in the maths department, which served the rest of the research station, which was about 2,000 strong, I think, at that time. And in particular, I worked on the first transatlantic telephone cable and also the third transatlantic telephone cable, worked on the first electronic telephone exchange, and the one that everyone remembers, I worked on an early computer called ERNIE, who was the premium bond computer for the lottery. And that was very early special purpose computing, and I learned a lot on that. For the first time then began to have staff reporting to me and sort of slowly turned into a manager.
So this is a period in the 1950s when, well, women didn't have careers, did they? So already you're beginning to make an extraordinary mark. I mean, well, for example, were you the only woman kind of working in your department as such? Or certainly...
I was horrified, Helen, when I turned up there, because it seems that there were there were very formal salary scales, and they went by age and gender. So there was one pay scale for men and another much lower pay scale for women. I started on £4 a week, which is you can just about live on in those days. But now you can, does £4 buy a cup of coffee? Not quite. The women that were working at the research station there were largely on the clerical side and administration. There was one other quite senior woman whom I never really got to know as it happened. And you just crept around and sort of tried to assimilate. And I used to dress almost as an honorary man, white shirt, which almost like and a little sort of black velvet tie around it, sort of it was like a vestigial tie. You had to really make sure that you fitted in and didn't tread on too many people's toes. We were very formal in those days. My name then was Miss Brooke, a name that I'd taken on naturalisation. And Miss Brooke kept her head down, worked very hard, and studied in the evening classes. And once I'd got my degree, I applied for promotion, but people did not promote women to graduate careers, and they stated that explicitly. So what I did was apply as an outside candidate, and of course that process actually allowed women in, and so I got my promotion. And you always had to dissemble. You had to make sure that you were fitting into what was a totally male environment.
Completely male-dominated, really. Yeah. And is this the period when Steve, as you changed your name because to apply for anything with a female name would have actually been discriminatory?
I started to use the name Steve in the early days of my business, so in the mid-60s, because I was writing lots of promotional letters to people, and they were letters in those days, not electronic mail, and receiving absolutely no response whatsoever. And my late husband suggested that I use the family nickname of Steve. And so I stopped writing letters with this double feminine, Stephanie Shirley, and I became Steve Shirley. And surprise, surprise, people began to answer my letters. I got the occasional interview, and I knew what I was talking about, and I managed to get some work for the company. So that was very much a sort of marketing ploy. Would one have to do it today? Of course not. But the masses of Leslie's and Alex and J.K. Rowling used her initials dissemble. And women still have to walk a narrow path to make sure that we progress as we wish to.
So what for you then was the turning point in leaving Dollis Hill, and because you set up your own company and became phenomenally successful? I mean, breaking the glass ceiling really. And
you say it's phenomenally successful, but it was 25 years before we paid a dividend. It was a very, very slow burn, and quite hard work as well. I don't think I could have the energy to do it again. What
was the turning point for you leaving Dollis Hill and deciding to to go it alone kind of thing and set up your own company. I mean, it's tough enough now, but back then, as a woman, to do that is quite phenomenal, isn't it?
There had been a time when married women were not employed in the civil service at all, and that had been softened so that married women had the chance to take out our pension if we left on marriage. And that's what I chose to do. So my pension for 8 years was still quite generous. It was all of £200, and that paid for our wedding. I married a materials physicist, and life moved on and became quite different. The speed of working in the commercial world is so much faster than in the civil service. But the quality of the work in the public sector I found so attractive, and is not always there in the business world, where it's speed, economy, rather than the emphasis on quality and getting it right. So it was quite a big transition, and I don't suppose I'm a natural business person. I know there's some stereotype of the Jew in business, but I don't think I fit that. I just enjoy doing new things, enjoy making new things happen. And in my later life, I've been extremely happy.
So in terms of technological stuff, what kind of things were you developing with your company? Some pretty groundbreaking stuff?
We did a lot of program evaluation review techniques. We did a lot of operational research. Scientific stock control was just coming in at that time. So once we'd got some skills in that, we did a lot. We did a little bit of scientific work. We worked for the underwater weapons research, and there was another for Harwell, for Aldermaston. Some of that was secure work. Some of it was just, perfectly open. We were just the same confidentiality as any other client. Our scientific division did not bloom as well as the commercial division, and we finished up really focusing on operational research and commercial stuff. Well, we finished up with projects that were $500 million.
Wow. That's extraordinary, isn't
Not
it?
in one go, for several years, but they were big projects.
But it meant, didn't it, eventually that the company was floated on the stock market and you were able to use your acquired wealth in very generous ways and in philanthropic ways.
Well, what is wealth? It gives you choice. And because I had a profoundly vulnerable child, I wasn't going to do a lot of things that perhaps other families with wealth might have done. And I concentrated on him and set up a charity eventually to look after him.
Shall we talk about him, your late son? Because he had autism, didn't he?
Yes. I felt that mathematics was not a good training to be a mother, and yet I absolutely loved it. I found that maternal love was so strong, much stronger than sexual or religious fervour. And I found, we had a very good start with our son Giles. He was very placid, perhaps too placid now looking back. I don't think so. I think we just had a very good start. And then he went through what is known as regression, when he began to lose skills rather than learning them. And that was, I must say, a nightmarish period. But he turned from a very placid baby with whom I had been able to bond very well, I think, and my husband was marvellous with him, into a wild, unmanageable toddler, far, far worse than the terrible twos. I mean, he was wild, a feral child, who finished up in what's called a subnormality hospital, an asylum, really. And when he began to lose some of his human rights, we decided, the company being successful by that time, that we would take him out of the hospital. He was not sectioned. And look after him again ourselves, this time with paid help. Mm-hmm. And that has grown into a charity called Autism at Kingwood. It's 25 years old now. It looks after 130 profoundly vulnerable adults on a long-term basis. It does diagnosis. It's helping people out of the Winterbourne hospital that the Quality Control Commission has just said something had to happen. There are still something like 2,000 healthy people with autism and other vulnerabilities living in hospitals. And this really isn't right. To get them out in the community is not costly. It costs a lot to keep somebody in hospital. It costs less to have them out in the community. But it takes more organising. Some of them are extremely costly. It took me 17 years to get that charity really properly up and running, that it would run when I wasn't there, that it was didn't need my money anymore. And I'm enormously proud of that. I learned a lot in setting up that charity. And so the other charities have taken much shorter periods of time, 5 years, 2 years. I'm a learning person. I suppose the biggest one, the one that gives me most pleasure, is a very special residential school for children with autism. And that goes up to the age of 25. And that, I don't know, it's the school that I would have liked for my Giles. Physically, intellectually and spiritually. It has nearly 90 pupils, employs 500 staff, big stuff. And we're just at the stage of thinking in terms of extending that to either a second school or an annex or something like that. But even that to the 100 pupils. And these are pupils that are very, very vulnerable, very high costs, which come from the local authorities, of course. But we're using robots there to help teach the children.
So extraordinarily inspirational work that you've done for autism, and because of your late son. What's your reward, do you think?
Well, I've been much honoured by my work technically and for autism, and the thing I'm most proud of, I suppose, for women. But really, I have had a wonderful life. I mean, technology has really opened the doors for me. Education has got me out of poverty. These are things that make my day-to-day so-called retirement vital and active, and continuing this drive that I have to make the life that was saved worth living. Being on the Kindertransport has given me three things. It really has allowed me to deal with change, because having got through that, nothing much phases me. And that's important in the digital world. It made me determined not to fritter the life that was saved away. So, I do work hard. I continue to work hard. I feel that is my justification. And of course, I've become a patriot. I mean, I love this country with a passion that only someone who has lost their human rights can feel. So that is my reward. I have purpose. I feel fulfilled. It's a long, but nowadays, very happy life.
In terms of your generation, when we think back to what they contributed, okay, you were a small child during the war itself, but thousands of German and Austrian Jewish refugees and other nationalities made a vital contribution, didn't they, to this country? And we think about the secret listeners, for example, that were based in those 3 stately homes, listening to the conversations of Hitler's generals and gaining intelligence for the wartime, that couldn't have been secured in any other way, working closely with Bletchley Park and the political warfare executive and the propaganda stuff. So all this feeding into the war, we have to thank, your generation, when you reflect that there is going to be this new national museum, this National Centre for Military Intelligence, what are your reflections when you think back to that contribution that's going to be honoured in this place?
I try always to look forward, but when I look back, I sort of think, I don't want to look back all the time. Do I really want to keep going over the Jewish tragedy of 6 million lost, including 1 million children? I also think of the story of the many adult males, and adult was classed as over 16, who were interned. My father was interned in Australia. He went out on the infamous ship Genera and was in Hay, New South Wales for many years. We didn't hear very much about him because mail was censored. But when he came back, he served this country. He joined the Pioneer Corps, who did some of the traditional pioneering things like digging ditches and such like, and he was always very worried, will I still be able to play the violin? But also he then served as a translator, and he then headed the Mid Wales Hospital, which then housed Italian and German prisoners of war. And he used a pseudonym in order to do that to the German prisoners of war, and this was a mental hospital, didn't know his original nationality. And then got his third uniform, because he had been in the German army as an 18-year-old.
In the First World War?
In the First World War.
Yeah.
And then he got his third uniform with the American army. He served at the Nuremberg trials. Which is the reason I was able to attend the Nuremberg trials, because he was there as a researcher. So it sort of comes full cycle.
It does, yeah. And that generation, we owe so much to them for our freedoms today. So what would you say to the generation today? What would be your message?
My message is not to look back, but to look forward. To think not of ourselves, but of other children coming up behind us, and make sure that we do the right thing, not just things right.
Steve, thank you so much for that inspirational interview today. I mean, it's been wonderful that you've been sharing the secrets of your life with us.
Thank you very much, Helen.
I've been delighted to be speaking with Dame Stephanie Shirley, otherwise known as Steve, sharing the secrets of her life today for the National Centre for Military Intelligence.
This has been a production for the National Centre for Military Intelligence. To find out more and to support the NCMI, please visit ncmi.co.uk.